There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Psychopathy.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon, retired NYPD Sergeant, 27-year veteran. And with me tonight is retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good, Billy, and I'm very honored and proud to have these two guys as our guests and introduce them, Bill.
Well, you know, I told them, like, don't expect anything. We're going to bust your balls, like, just like we do any other cops we have on this show, you know? Cops and cops, you know?
That's what DEA stands for. Don't expect anything.
That's right. But I just want to tell, you know, I have their book right here. We see it, Manhunters. Let me see if I can hold it correctly so you can see it. And hugely successful. And, of course, the story of them being involved in the capture, not just involved, instrumental in the capture of Pablo Escobar, and on the Netflix special, Narcos. And many of you folks should know that show. And if you don't, go watch it quick and come back. No, you know, it's an amazing show. And these guys, they're living large now. They're doing unbelievable. They're going to 50, 60 dates a year, talking. I tried to see if they wear Rolexes. They don't, but they're gonna even show their wrists. But doing great. Steve, DEA agent Steve Murphy and Javier Pena. Welcome to the show, guys.
Oh man, thank you that's a great introduction. It's kind of embarrassing.
I could never repeat that introduction. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, honored to be here, man. Looking forward to it.
That's great. You know I had invited you guys a couple of months ago, and something happened. We couldn't do it, but now I'm glad to have you guys here. Now the story of you guys, and I know both of you worked in small police departments before your dream of going on the DEA became true. Steve, why don't you tell us just a quick background on you working on a small police department?
Thank you, Bill. And truly, we are honored to be here with you guys. It's hanging out with retired cops. It's like coming back into the law enforcement brotherhood and sisterhood. So just can't tell you how tickled we are to be with you. But I started as a uniformed police officer in 1975 in a small town called Bluefield, West Virginia. We had 35 police officers. You know, it's equivalent to NYPD.
1975. That's the year I graduated high school. I didn't know you guys were this old.
Hey, don't rub it in. Don't rub it in. Okay. But spent 6 years there as a uniform officer. Then went to the railroad police, believe it or not, with Norfolk Southern Railroad. Back then,
hey, a fellow transit cop.
There you go. There you go. Did that for almost 6 years, but it just wasn't my cup of tea. I mean, I love railroad police officers, dedicated individuals, most of them former police officers, but it just wasn't what I was interested in. And heard about DEA, didn't know much about it. Had a good friend, Pete Ramey, who was a railroad police officer, former Virginia State Trooper, that told me all about it and got me interested, and I applied. It took 2 years to get hired. Came on in 1987, 3 months in the DEA Academy, then first posting Miami, Florida. Got there in 1987 for 4 years. 3 years in Bogota, Colombia, 3.5 in Greensboro, North Carolina, 3.5 in Atlanta, 5 Washington, 3.5 back in Atlanta, and finished out my career in Washington. So it's like a yo-yo. It sounds like I can't hold a job, doesn't it?
It sounds like you were hooked up to wind up in Miami as your first assignment.
You know what? It was like being a kid in a candy store. I fell in love with this job. I got to tell you a quick story. Now I've been a cop for almost 12 years. The most cocaine I've ever seen after 12 years was 2 ounces, a baggie like this. The first case I got to work on undercover with DEA, we picked up 400 kilos.
Wow.
So I went from 2 ounces to 880 pounds down the Turks and Caicos Islands. I tell everybody I was addicted to cocaine, just in a different way, right?
That's unbelievable.
It was cool.
And, you know, back then the bodies were dropping left and right all over the streets of Miami, right?
It was still the Wild West. It had calmed down a little bit from the mid 80s, but They still had the refrigerated trucks out there where the morgue was storing the bodies because they just simply didn't have enough room for all the murders that were going on down there.
And that was that pre-Marielitos boat people?
No, this is post. This is post. They were already there. You know, and I mean, if you've seen the movie, Javier talks about this during our shows. If you've seen the movie Scarface,
look at the bad guy. Look, everyone, look at the bad guy.
Say hello to the bad guy, because you're never going to see
Your womb is polluted.
Guy.
You can't even have a baby.
But you know what? I mean, it was we were much younger then. It was exciting. Life was good. You know, I thought it was going to be like Miami Vice, where you'd have the long hair and the fancy cars and the bikini-clad girls. I'm still waiting on all that shit to happen. Maybe
Javier,
I like the way those guys, they would carry a big 45 with their pants with no belt and just whip it out like
yeah. How did your pants stay up carrying a 45 in it, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
I'm talking about.
Javier, I don't know if you can beat Steve's story, but same story.
Well, I think I'm a little older than you because I graduated high school in '74. So yeah, you graduated in '75. I graduated '74, and you know what got me with internship. You know, I was in college, and I did a stint at the prison unit in Huntsville. You know, Texas Department of Corrections, and I did about 3-4 months. And then afterwards, Sheriff's Office in Laredo, 1977 was hiring, and so I applied, got there, and I did what a lot of cops do. I went to school during the day, worked at night. Right, I asked for the night shift, like a lot of us have done. You know, I was able to get my degree, and towards the end of I think my senior year is when I saw a posting that DEA was hiring. And you know what? I'm different from Steve. I did not know what DEA was. I had to ask somebody, hey, what the hell is DEA, drug enforcement? Somebody said, stupid, it's the federal narcs. You know, what attracted me, you know, I was making $10,000 a year with the sheriff's office, and I think the DEA was paying, I think it was starting like at 20 or 21,000. I'm like, whoa, shit, I'll double my pay, you know? And I applied. And, you know, my deal was to be there a couple of years because I love Laredo. I was a lieutenant. I was teaching part-time at a junior college. You know, I had it made. So I just said, I just want to go see what the feds is all about. So, and my first job in DEA was Austin, Texas, back in 1984. And Austin was rocking at that time. It was the start of that music industry. We used to go see George Strait for free. You know, it was getting started. And, you know, and also I got to say that, you know, I had like 10 months and I got sent to Mexico to help in the search of our agent, Kike Camarena, when he got abducted, kidnapped, killed. So I had like 10 months on the job. That opened my eyes, you know, for the search. Anyway, I'm a young guy.
Javier, can I just ask you a quick question about that?
Of course.
That the kidnapping and the murder of Kike Camarena, that just shut down everything. And that's the way law enforcement used to be. You're going to kill a DE agent. You're going to kill an NYPD cop. We're going to shut this city down.
Yeah,
is it still like that? Or do you think
right? It's not
like that anymore.
No, of course not. Not in Mexico. But at that time, it was so serious that the president shut down the border because we weren't getting help from Mexico, no cooperation. So I think it was like a 2-hour. Can you imagine the whole Mexico-U.S. border was shut down? That showed, you know, the Mexicans then scrambled and they were finally able to tell us where the body was. But, and you're right, somebody gets hurt, law enforcement, we're going to go after you. And it could be, you know what, it could be 1 year. Look at 30 years. Look at what just happened with Caro Quintero, right? The guy who killed our agent, Camarena. The guy went to prison. He paid a judge. They let him out. He was on the run for about 13 years. He finally gets arrested this past week. And you know what? I've been doing some talk shows in Spanish, and I always tell them, hey, I hope Mexico does the right thing and gets him extradited, because if he's done, he's going to be out of jail here pretty soon. And, you know, the corruption, as we know. So anyway, that's just a little bit, you know, so Austin, I did 4 years, went to Colombia. I get there in 88 and I leave 94. From Colombia, I go to Puerto Rico, which was an eye opener. I know it's working in Puerto Rico, and I had the task force, the police task force. Wow, we did a lot of stuff. There was a lot of violence at that time in Puerto Rico with all the carjackings and all the drug points that, But anyway, after Puerto Rico, 3 years, went to headquarters, 2, then went back to Colombia for another 2 years, then San Antonio, then San Francisco, Puerto Rico, and finished my career in Houston in 2014. So I did 30 years with DEA and 7 years with the sheriff's office. And, I tell people, and like some of y'all, right, when I was with the sheriff's office, you know what? I hated the feds. They treated us like shit. You know how it was.
Yeah.
We got the same treatment in New York, boy.
Yeah, the same thing, man. They'd come in.
Not DEA so much, more but the Phoebes, the FBI.
Yeah, a lot
Named
of
them the
other
Phoebes, but
agencies. Anyway, so that's been, like you said, hey, I came on with DEA with 2 years and I stayed 30, but it's been a good career. It's been fun. A lot of trying moments, a lot of times where I just wanted to quit. I think you all know what, you just keep on going, right?
Let's talk about, and especially for our listeners, and maybe I'll address this to you, Steve, is that you're in Miami. How do you go about catching these big cases?
Man, I tell you what, in the late, anytime in the 1980s, if you couldn't make a drug case in Miami, you needed to go find a different career. You hear the stories about the bales of marijuana and the bales of cocaine washing up on the beaches. That's all true. I mean, that stuff, it was not literally falling out of the sky, but it was coming from somewhere, right? Just like any other job, you're the newbie, you're the rookie on the job. And I've been a cop for 12 years, but when you come into a new agency, you're the rookie all over again, right? So I got hooked up with a senior agent, Gene Frankar, who was just phenomenally intelligent, knew how to make cases. That was his case where we picked up the 400 keys down in Turks and Caicos Islands that he'd been working on for a couple of years. And actually that case, when it was ready to go to trial, to grand jury, he had the evidence to indict Raul Castro, Fidel Castro's brother, out of Cuba.
Wow.
Because the whole purpose of the case was to show that Cuba was being used as a transshipment point for cocaine coming out of Colombia, coming into South Florida. And so this was my first eye-opening opportunity to see how politics works in the federal government. Through the chain of command, the call comes down from the White House. You're not indicting him. You back off. You leave him alone. So he never got indicted. And in our book, Manhunters, it's just so everybody knows, we didn't write that book. We hired an extremely intelligent Isabel Vincent ghostwriter. Isabel is fantastic. Just on the phone with her yesterday, as a matter of fact. We've become friends and stay in contact. And she did the research to corroborate that story, where when it came out publicly that the United States wanted to indict Raul and the White House said no. Well, the Castros stepped up and said, oh, well, you know what? It wasn't us. It was these 4 Cuban army generals. And so we put them before a firing squad and we killed them for you. You talk about scapegoats, man.
I was just going to say scapegoats. Yeah, they scapegoated those 4 guys for sure.
Oh,
Not So Caped Crusader 62. Thank you for the $10 super chat. And he says, my thanks to Steve and Javier for being here to tell the story. Rest in peace, Kiki. He's referring to Kiki Camarena.
Very nice. Very well.
Thank you so much. And that's, one of the things that I think it's so, and look, I was never in narcotics in my whole career. I went towards what was the results of narcotics, which was robberies and murders and shootings and things like that. But when you talk about the big drug trade and at the big level, like you guys went after Pablo Escobar, governments are involved, and there's huge corruption, whether it's on the side with Pablo Escobar, Colombia, or whether it's on our country being corrupt. And we can draw parallels to today with the open borders of people pouring across our border and the fentanyl problem with this country right now. And it's seemingly no one's doing anything about it. And it seems like it's being allowed. Your comments, guys.
You know what? You're right. That fentanyl that's coming across. And my last job was in Houston. So I ran the Southwest border area, all the crossing. what I'm seeing right now, it hasn't stopped, man. It has. There's still a lot of dope, and especially this counterfeit pills. You know, we belong to another group, and you hear the stories from family members that my kid never used dope, which is true, but they gave him a pill, or he bought one was just couldn't sleep. A buddy of his gave him a Xanax pill that was filled with fentanyl that was bought in the black market. That's the type of examples. Ladies who never taken, hey, a friend here, try this pill. They bought it off the black market and it's filled with fentanyl. That's like thousands and thousands of examples of what's going on. So it is bad. And I just, we see it. I mean, I see the seizures here at the border. I think they got another 100 pounds in Laredo of fentanyl. I mean, it's coming across. And you know what? We have the demand, right? I mean,
Javier, the scary thing that I've been seeing recently is that the case that I think you're referencing with the pill, where the person bought the one pill that had a backache or Xanax, right. It was bought through like Snapchat, which is a social media outlet that is geared towards young people. That's the real scary thing. A kid that really wasn't addicted to drugs, but was accidentally poisoned with a pill that was marketed as a Xanax or as a Percocet. And however, it turned out to be fentanyl. And you don't need very much fentanyl to put you into cardiac arrest, as we know. So
and Phil,
that's a real scary thing.
Yeah, Phil, thank you for saying that, because that's what's happening. People that never use, they bought them on all this websites, and they're counterfeit pills. They're filled, like I said, all you need is, I think they've explained it to us, it's just like one little salt grain, and that's gonna kill
the size of a grain of salt. Exactly.
Right, grain of salt. But yeah, you hear that example where my kid, and I believe him, never, but hey buddy, my back is hurting, I can't sleep. Hey buddy, here, try this pill, Xanax. It could be any pain pill out there. Just they're counterfeit. So that is a problem. But going back, the border, we're still seeing a lot of dope coming across. And it's happening. This traffickers aren't starting. What happened with Chapo, right? He's in the U.S. Somebody else took it over, right? So it's just it's an ongoing game.
Just to add to that a little bit, with the Mexican cartels, they're getting all the chemicals from the Chinese. So the Chinese are just as culpable in this mess as the Mexican cartels. So I just want to make sure they get their fair share of the credit for what's going on.
Absolutely.
It also, when we talk about it, I always, when people say, you guys are cops, why are you going to be so political? The P in police stands for politics. Trust me. And it's so damn true. Willis Pony, thank you so much for the $9.99 super chat. Wow. Already blown away by these superstar guests.
Thank you, Willis.
You're absolutely right. These guys are superstars. And,
Bill, let me make a point about the political before you go on, because I got this thought in my mind. The politics of what Steve was just saying, how they had one of the Castro brothers ready for indictment, and the government said, "Oh no, you can't indict him." I mean, politics is part of the it's part of the mixture in law enforcement, unfortunately. I mean, local police departments like ours was basically the police commissioner works at the hands of the mayor, and the mayor is a political, he's elected. So politics plays a major role in law enforcement.
Well, and that wasn't the last time we had that happen, where we were going after somebody, the head of a country. Javier, you want to tell the story, or you want to?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So when we finished up the Escobar investigation, when he was killed before we left Colombia, there was a guy came in who was an informant. Who became an informant, but he worked for Escobar. And he told us his job was to fly to Haiti every few weeks. And he was given suitcases full of money. I think it was $400,000 a month he was given to the president of Haiti. It's no secret. This is history that we're talking about. Jean-Bertrand Aristide was the president of Haiti at the time. So, when you make an accusation against the head of a country, that's a big deal in the federal government. It's got to go to the highest levels to get approval for indictments and so forth. And we're in Miami ready to go to the grand jury on this. And we get another one of those calls that comes down through the chain of command from the White House that says, stand down, you're not indicting this guy. Well, if you go back and look at who the president was at that time, and I won't say his name, Slick Willie, but you can figure it out.
I love this guy.
And if you look what happened to Jean-Bertrand Aristide, the president, our president, gave him asylum in the United States. And so Javier and I, after we were, when we were in Colombia, we had SEAL Team 6 there with us in Medellin for 18 months. We had the Army's Delta Force. And in retirement, Javier and I were participating in this training course, and it's nothing tactical or operational. That we were going to the SEAL Team 6 headquarters in Dam Neck, Virginia, putting on a 3-day school. And we get to meet a lot of the new SEALs that weren't around back during our day. And you actually spoke to one, Javier, right?
Yeah.
And he talked about how he was on the team that reinstated Aristide as the president of Haiti. And now you go back and look at that, and I try to stay apolitical because I can make fun of both sides of the aisle. Politicians are just an easy target.
Oh yeah.
But if you look at the foundation that particular president continues to support, it's the Haitian Foundation. So it just makes you wonder what's really going on here.
Yeah.
Steve, I remember they brought Aristide to New York, and they had a big thing for him in Central Park. Yeah. And before he fled Haiti, they put a hit on him, and he got into New York, and they were like, "Oh, Premier, we're so glad that you're okay." I was like, "Who is this guy?" It was
crazy. The politics, the bureaucracy gets in the way, and it just really interferes. And that's one thing we try to tell people is we're law enforcement. All of us are law enforcement. We don't make the damn laws. We're just tasked with enforcing the laws. And then when you try to do your job, that's when the politics gets in the way.
Let's get back to the whole thing where in Colombia, the drugs were just out of control. And we, of course, have Pablo Escobar. And he's ruling with an iron fist. He's whacking people, killed over 500 cops, I believe, right? Thousands of cops. And, a drug operation of that size cannot operate without the corruption on the level that he had. I mean, he was paying off presidents. He's paying off. The police were in bed with him. And I mean, I can't imagine how you knew who you could trust and who you couldn't trust. Maybe you didn't. Yeah. And it had to be a really slippery slope to work on back in those days.
Yeah, well, and you know what? At the beginning, and there was some corruption, but we made the mistake where we had cops from Medellin working with us. So what Escobar did was he got to their families and told them, "Hey, you're a cop. I know he's assigned to the search block." That's what we called el bloque de búsqueda, where we were looking for Pablo Escobar, and pretty much would tell them, "Hey, if your kid doesn't call you, and then you have to call me that they're coming after me, I'm gonna kill your kid. If he doesn't make that call, then I'm gonna kill you, the family." So we learned. So from there on, we didn't use cops from Medellin. But you know what? The corruption with the cops was not that out there. Corruption with politicians, it was. We saw that. We saw judges being corrupt. But with the cops, and I got, I'm sure we'll get into it here in a little bit, but what happened with them is that because Pablo was killing a lot of them, these cops hated Pablo Escobar. They hated, and in fact, they would tell us, "Hey, Javier, Steve, we're not here to seize money. We're not here to seize dope. We're here to kill Pablo Escobar." That was that vengeance that they had because of all the cops that Pablo had killed. So it was different. Like I said, I saw the corruption at the highest levels. I saw the officials. We have and I'm not sure, but there's a videotape around because we videotaped it, where Pablo Escobar attorney, his main attorney, comes into a room, and we had a videotape. Tells a Colombian congressman. He says, "I'm working." The attorney says, right on the tape, "I'm working for Pablo Escobar, and Mr. Escobar wants you to vote against the extradition process." And here is, I think they gave him like $100,000, and we have that on tape. So, and that was that philosophy that Mr. Escobar is giving you this money, and vote against extradition. Then the judges, I tell a story where sicarios walked into this judge's office one day briefcase and said, "Judge, we're here. We're sent by Mr. Escobar, and we know you have a case on him. Mr. Escobar wants you to drop the charges on him, and this money is yours, $100,000." That judge kicked out those two sicarios. The next day, they killed the judge, his wife, and his kids. So from there on, people started accepting those briefcases, and I do not blame them for taking those briefcases. So, yeah, the corruption played, but we had a special group, and again, there.
Well, Javier, how about this picture on the screen? Could you tell our viewers what that is?
Yep, that's the famous La Catedral, Pablo Escobar's so-called prison. And you know, if you see that fence, I mean, there was holes and there was, and there was no bars, inside. I think one window had some bars, but the rest of the Pablo Escobar's prison, it wasn't a prison; it was a country.
Oh, it was like his country club prison.
Yeah, it was a country club setting.
It was like his summer home.
Yeah, it was fancy. I mean,
there's his hippopotamuses there. He loved hippos, right?
And you've heard about the hippo problem right now, right? In Colombia,
they're overrunning the country, right?
About 100 hippos. They escaped from his zoo, from his finca, from his ranch, and they multiplied. I think they're about 100 right now. They're making havoc in Colombia, destroying all sorts of stuff. They do not know how to control them. So you know what? I'm glad that happened, because, and you know what? And I blame the government for doing that, for letting, the guy had a zoo, had animals. That's Pablo Escobar's wife. And so the animals have escaped. Well, the hippos. All the rest, some of the animals went to the zoos, but they let the hippos go. So they multiplied.
I got a quick question, Billy, regarding we touched base on the corruption end of it, but specifically now, not counting analysts and whatever contacts you had throughout the world, really, how many guys worked on, or how many agents, whether they be guys or girls, how many altogether worked on the task force to get Pablo Escobar?
You're looking at him, Steve and I. That's
really.
Yep. I mean, we had an analyst back in Bogota, but you know what? DEA, and I don't know who came up with the concept, but they created a program called TKO, Targeted Kingpin Offender Program, where people, DEA working in Miami, New York, NYPD was a big help. NYPD did a lot of stuff during the Escobar days, because there was a lot of Escobar traffickers working in New York, right? Remember? And NYPD was always sending us leads, so they did a great job with us. But
I think Bernie Kerik had a little to do with that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. No, it was great. So they would focus on anybody working for Escobar in the States and take them down. So it was great. I mean, there was times we would do simultaneous takedowns in New York, Miami, and we'd take down people down in Colombia. And we've gotten away from that concept, but that concept worked, because you're taking down people that are working in both countries, So it was good. But there was a lot of activity in New York with Escobar people.
Now, he was terrified of the extradition process, because obviously if he got extradited outside of Colombia, he was going to do life without parole for his.
Right. And you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, Bill, because a lot of people do not realize that Pablo Escobar's fight was based on extradition. He did not want to get extradited. In fact, he had it was a letterhead, and they would drop it at the bomb sites. Car bombs, when they would put the car bomb, you would see a letter that said the extraditables. In English, it read, well, in Spanish, it was prefiero una tumba en Colombia que un calabozo en Estados Unidos. Translated, I prefer a tomb in Colombia than a jail cell in the United States. That was what the fight was all about.
Wow. When we had Sammy the Bull Gravano on our show, he had mentioned that he thought that perhaps the mob could have been more successful if they weren't as violent as they were, that perhaps they killed too many people. Do you think the drug trade, that's also true? Or is that the only way they keep people in line and they instill that fear, is to have that violent and the willingness and the ability to kill people at will?
Well, you know, crime is extremely violent, and I'm preaching to the choir by telling you guys. I mean, you know, being a cop in New York, I can't imagine what that's like. But I tell you this: the 1 year that Pablo was in prison, the car bomb stopped. So I'm certainly not saying that's the solution to letting him surrender to his custom-built prison, which turned out to be a joke. I mean, it was what a huge embarrassment for the country of Colombia. And just speaking of Colombia, just so you guys know, we love it. We love Colombia. We love the Colombian people down there are extremely accepting. If you go in and act like an ugly American, they're going to treat you like the ugly American. But if you go with a smile on your face and realize that you're in their culture and try to get along, try to use what little bit of Spanish you know, if any at all, they're very accepting. They're very pleasant people. But again, you act like the ugly American, they'll tell you where the airport is and you can put your happy butt on the plane and, you know, head on back up to the States. But that was just one example that, you know, when he got his way, the violence did stop. Now we know he was continuing to run his drug enterprise from prison. He was rebuilding his coffers. You know, he was charging a war tax. He was just rebuilding his whole organization. So it wasn't like he went in this little country club and went straight, you know what I mean? And then towards the end, when he thought Kiko Moncada and Fernando Galeano were holding out on him, he ends up killing both of them in the prison. And that's what eventually led to the escape. So the violence, I think Sammy the Bull might be right, because the violence is what brings so much bad publicity. Another example, when Los Pepis became into existence down there. Now Los Pepis is nothing but a group of vigilantes, which we don't condone in law enforcement. The rule of law does not condone vigilantes, right? And that's what Los Pepis were. But what they did is they took Escobar's tactics and used them against him, which were extremely violent, killing innocent people. And you know what? The initial response of the Colombian public was thumbs up. Let's give him a taste of his own medicine. But then he ends up killing a couple of attorneys, which that in itself might not be such a bad thing. But one of them happened to have.
Didn't Shakespeare say first, let's kill all the attorneys? Didn't he say that?
Bill Murray isn't watching, Bill.
Yes, he did. But one of the attorneys had his kid with him, 10-year-old kid, and they killed the kid. Now in Colombia, you know, here in the United States, we don't put stuff like that in the media, in the newspapers, and on TV. In Colombia, they do. They show the bodies. It's very, I guess, grotesque, but I mean, it's real. It's raw what you see.
In your face, so to speak.
Yeah. And so when that happened, then that's what started turning public opinion against Los Pepis and the violence. So that's what turned, you know, so all of that to say, Sammy the Bull might be right by saying that.
Yeah. He was onto something, that Sam.
Well, as Pony, only these two men took down Escobar, U.S. heroes with capes. Us heroes. Well, as Pony, again, thank you for another $9.99 super chat. Holy hippos, she says.
Holy I just hippos. Want to read out a few statistics on this Pablo Escobar that I found really, really amazing. Now, during the 80s and 90s, 80% of the cocaine that was coming into the country was from him. His net worth, they said it was $30 billion. It was probably much, much higher. This really strikes. $2,500, I believe, a month on rubber bands just to stack the cash. Now think about that. And that's in the 80s and 90s. The rat's eating $500 million every year of his money. He burned $2 million to keep his daughter warm at some point. He offered to pay a $10 billion national debt of Colombia, I guess, when he was trying to, you know, stay out of jail. Owned 800 homes, built 60 lakes, smuggled 15 tons of cocaine a day at his peak, 30,000 pounds a day. I mean, and he earned $420 million a week estimated. I mean, this is really like, this sounds like the template for Amazon today, that this guy was a tremendous, tremendous businessman. I mean, obviously he was using violence and car bombs to, you know, accelerate his business, but wow, this is really something. I mean, when you think about those numbers and the $2,500 in rubber bands, I mean, come on, that's really, really insane.
It is. It's unbelievable. I mean, people think that, you know, this is all made up by Hollywood or whatever, and it wasn't. That's the reason Javier and I travel around the world. And this is our 7th year of doing this, is to tell the true story. You know, we present it as a lesson in history, and we study history to learn from our mistakes, right? So that ostensibly you don't want to make the same mistakes again, but the truth is we always do. But that's what we want. We just want the world to know the truth. It's our book tells the truth. The other book that's out, Killing Pablo, and, you know, It's so. And that's the book, that book cover you just put up. That's the book cover for our book in Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah.
That looks pretty damn good. You know, I wanted to just talk about this picture because it was rather controversial. And when it came out, and the previous one where they just have the national police, the Colombia National Police there.
Mm-hmm.
You of course worked and risked your life and went on raids and did all kinds of stuff with these guys. So when they did kill Pablo Escobar, and I know that Steve, I heard you talk about it on another podcast, that you 100% gave them credit because people were trying to say, oh no, it was SEAL Team 6 killed him. No, it was the DEA. And you said, no, it was absolutely the Colombia National Police that killed him, and you gave them credit for that. Mm-hmm. So I think that when they did kill him and take him down, here's this violent man that, you know, had killed thousands of people. And it's almost like, you know, when you go fishing, you ever go deep sea fishing, you catch a big fish, you want to take a picture of it, right? But I don't think that the people in our country more or less appreciated you posing with his dead body. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's you know, I'll be honest with you, it's not a picture I'm especially proud of. You're right. When that picture hit Washington, you know, DEA headquarters, I was a little bit of hot water over that. What happened out there that day? And if you've seen the Narcos series, it shows that I was on the roof when Pablo was killed. That's not true. I was back at the base. I rode out with Colonel Martinez, who was our boss. He was the head of the search block. I rode out with him after the fact. So, you know, that's why we say, and here's the other thing I'll say before I explain that picture is, if you don't remember anything else we tell you today, are you guys still there?
I just gave you the whole screen. It's okay.
Oh, you can tell I'm very technically savvy, right? But if everybody that's listening to this doesn't remember anything else we say today, this is what we want you to take away from our discussion this evening, is the true heroes of that entire investigation of the Colombian National Police, because they took their country back from this piece of crap. You know, I mean, you guys are gracious. You call us heroes, and other people do too. We're not heroes. We're just a couple of professional law enforcement officers, just like you guys, who went and did our job. And people say, well, what happened after you killed Escobar? The same thing that happens in any crime. When that crime's over, you move on to the next case, right?
Exactly.
Well, you know, Steve, you're so right, because I mean, in New York City in the middle 80s, the late 80s, the crack wars were going on, and the streets of Washington Heights were absolutely controlled by Dominicans from the Dominican Republic that ran these drug corners, and there was 129 murders that year. And the blood was every night. It seemed like, well, every 2 or 3 days, there was a fresh murder. 129 murders. And it was all because of the cocaine trade, the crack trade. It was out of control. And it wasn't only Washington Heights. I believe in 1990, there was 2,200 murders in New York City. And largely it was because of the drug trade.
Yeah. Yeah. So back to that photograph, as it turns out, I used to carry a camera with me everywhere I went down there. It's, you know, it's my wife's little 35 millimeter, would fit in my pocket. And you can see we just wear blue jeans and polo shirts down there. We weren't allowed to wear anything that looked like police or military. So when I get out there that day, I start taking these pictures, and those other guys in the pictures, those are the cops we've been working with for 18 months. Those guys are like brothers. You know, these are the guys that when it hits the fan, they're risking their own lives to keep us safe. You know, we knew they're not going to run and leave us, but they also knew we wouldn't run off and leave them either. So it was a very, very strong bond, mutual respect between each other. So I'm taking their pictures out there, and they're like, Steve, and my nickname was Stick, because they couldn't say Steve correctly. So you know, I'm a lot of things. I'm not a stick. But they'd say, Steve, come on, get in here and get the picture. And so that's how I got that picture. Now, we show that picture in every one of our shows, because we always have a Q&A at the end. And I don't shy away from it. I want people to know why that picture was taken and what the significance of it is. And this is the honest truth. I got caught up in the elation with everybody else because we were all so freaking happy that Pablo Escobar was finally dead. A man who's killed over 1,000 police officers were killed in one case. Just one case, not one city, not one country, one case. It's just unimaginable.
How about Kiki? How about Kiki? What he did to Kiki? I mean, that alone, you should be proud of that picture. And anybody that had a problem with it, I don't curse off and fuck them. I'm very proud of that picture. He deserves to be where he was. He killed 1,000 police officers, many, many innocent people, and they tortured that poor Kiki Camarena. So he got exactly what he deserved.
And you know what? We were on a documentary. I can't. Was it Facing Escobar? Javier, was that?
Yeah.
But anyway, one of his remaining sicario, who's now dead, he died a few years ago from cancer. They called him Popeye. Popeye says on this documentary, we attribute maybe 10 to 15, maybe 20,000 deaths to Pablo Escobar. Popeye says that number's completely wrong. He said the number's more like 50,000 deaths that Pablo is responsible for. Popeye admitted on TV that he killed as many as 300 people himself and arranged as many as 3,000 murders, and he was just one sicario working for Pablo. So people say, well, especially when we go to Europe, they like to bust our chops over there. We used to let them yell up questions from the audience, and we learned our lesson not to do that. So we handle it a different way now. But they say, hey, your job as a law enforcement professional is to protect human life and property. And that's right. That's what our main responsibility is. Well, there's a picture of you with a dead man. How do you explain that? Man, the reason we're all smiling is because we all knew as soon as Pablo Escobar ceased to exist, every citizen in the country of Colombia was safer just simply because this one guy's gone. And then people will say, well, don't you have any remorse? Just like you said, Phil, he got exactly what he deserved that day. That boy didn't deserve any better than what he got there.
Exactly. Well, Les Pony, again, thank you for the $9.99 super chat. They don't make them like you anymore. Mad respect. Amazing. Wow, you guys are like celebrities here on our show.
You guys, you talk about Bill and Phil there.
I don't know. I think she's talking about you two guys. That's I told you I listened to Patrick Bet David, and you guys are on their show, and I can't put anything on his show on our show because I did it once and I get hit with a copyright infringement. But there was one thing he spoke about with you guys, and Pablo Escobar was on the phone with his wife. And he was saying, honey, I love you so much. I miss you. And they could hear the person being tortured in the background as he's telling his wife how much he loves her. And then at some point, the guy was killed. So that's a real psycho. That's a real psychopath that can do that.
Yeah. And you know what? And I listened to that call. I personally listened to it. I used to have the tape. I cannot find it. But anyway, the way it is, we were intercepting him, and he's telling his wife, he misses her. I'll be home soon. I love you. And then it's a shriek. It's a yell. It's a shriek. And he covers the phone and he turns around and he tells the sicarios, cover his mouth, and then continues to tell his wife how much he loves her. I mean, look, if you analyze that attitude, how a person can change from I love you, honey, cover his mouth. The guy's yelling. They're still hitting him, and one of the things that we learned from Pablo Escobar, he hated informants, hated snitches. What do we call them now? Sources, I don't know. I'm retired. Back in our day, we called them snitches, right? I mean,
confidential informants. Yeah,
confidential informants.
CIs or cooperators.
Yeah, CI.
Those who get stitches.
Yeah, I grew up with, hey, the guy's a snitch, So anyway, Escobar hated snitches, hated informants, and I had 5 of my informants killed by Pablo Escobar. And his orders to the sicarios were, do not just kill them. I want you to torture them. I want to find out what they're saying against me. And that was a perfect example. Poor guy yelling. And then he just, like Pablo Escobar just told his wife, hey, I'll be home soon. I miss you. I mean, how does a person react? How does his psychic? It's just, we studied him, and the guy could be the friendliest. And you know what? We told people this guy was very charismatic. Another story, one of the sicarios, 15-year-old, And, we don't have arrest powers in Colombia. I had to get involved in arresting some of our cops. It was my informant. Anyway, so we arrested the sicario in Medellin, took him back to the base, and 15 years old. And I'll never forget what he told me. He says, "You know what, Mr. Pena?" He says, "I work for Pablo Escobar." He says, me and my mother were broke. We were living in a cardboard box on the street, on the neighborhood. Pablo saw us, took us in, gave us money, built us a house. He said, "My allegiance," he says, "I will die and I will kill for Pablo Escobar. He has saved my life." And he went on to explain during the war Pablo Escobar had with the cops, he put bounties on police officers, right? Bounty for sicarios, any uniformed police officer walking that they would kill. So this sicario, 15 years old, he says, "By the way, I've already killed 10 police officers." He was bragging. I said, "What?" He said, "Yep." He says, "I walk behind them. I shoot them in the back of their head. At the end of the day, if I kill 3, I collect $300. That's, and he was proud of it, that he had already killed 10 police officers under the orders of Pablo Escobar, bounties. Again, and you know what? $100 for a human being, for a hero that's out there protecting us, and thousands of police officers. And I'm sure if there were higher ups, they would get a little bit more, but a regular police, it's just that's Pablo Escobar at his worst. And then the sicario says, "You know what?" He says, "Pablo will come," and it was one of the poorest neighborhood churches in Medellin. And we would always hear, there's a meeting at the terrace, La Terraza. We never knew what the terrace was. Matter of fact, when I went back to film with Netflix, that's when I found out from one of the persons who was helping us. We mentioned La Terraza. I says, "Yeah." He said that was one of the poorest churches in Catholic churches in Medellin. So he would have a meeting. And this kid explained to me, he said, there'd be about 300, 400 young kids, 14, 15, 16, 17. And Pablo would come in. He said he would hug all those young kids, kiss them, give them money. But then, hey, you're working for me. So this thugs were all proud to work for Pablo Escobar, and they would kill, at his any person that he wanted to have killed. Pablo Escobar would, they would kill. So that was that, that charismatic side of Pablo Escobar.
Javier, one of the things that, from our point of view, and we're not totally naive because we're in law enforcement, but folks that listen to the show, this drug dealing at this level is a national security problem for the country or the countries that the drugs are being imported to, specifically the United States. And I know, people think that Trump's out of his mind, but Trump talked about using the military to invade Mexico to go after the cartels. I mean, it's probably not a horrible idea. And Colombia back then, and of course, I understand the politics. It could start a world war. But, the drug dealers are using weapons of war and tactics almost like Hitler would use to create this reign of terror. So isn't that the force need to be met with force?
No, I believe, of course. And you know what? One of the good things about us that Colombia wanted our help. They invited us. They invited Steve and I after Pablo Escobar escaped. They said, "Guys, we need you at our base." Whereas Mexico doesn't want our help. I mean, there's a lot of problems right now with Mexico, and this is why I just want this Caro Quintero guy to get extradited right away. But you got to meet force, with force. I don't know what the solution is, but we cannot back down. We still have to go in there and arrest all this traffickers. And one of the things I always mention is, what's the one thing this traffickers fear all over the world? What do they fear? Coming to a jail cell in the United States. You see that in Mexico, Colombia, other countries. So we're doing something right out there. But
I think it would be less corruptible in the United States. It'd be more difficult to get to a jail, corrections officers, or to bribe people to facilitate escape or something like that. I think it's easier in Colombia, Mexico, whatever. That's why I think
it is. And obviously, we have corruption in the States. We had them in DEA. We had some corrupt people in DEA. I know you've had them, and I know the prison system has had them, but it's not to the level that it is in other countries. It's a couple of rotten apples, right? I mean, it's not to that level. I mean, overall, we're good. But in those countries, money pays, and you can get anything you want to in those countries.
I still wonder, like with the whole corruption thing, like even in our country, we have this thing called sanctuary cities. And I find that to be tremendously corrupt. You know what I mean? Like, obviously one group, one party believes in sanctuary cities. Oh, okay, we're going to allow these people that are here illegally, these certain cities, we're going to give them sanctuary. And even though it's hurting our country and costing us billions of dollars, we're going to have certain cities. New York is one of them. New York, California,
Chicago,
allowing illegal people to come in here, and that's damaging our country. And I'm sure I'm going to get some hate texts in here. That's fine. I believe that's damaging our country, sanctuary cities. And we had that little weasel mayor that, thank God, de Blasio, he was behind that sanctuary city stuff.
Well, if you look at Lady Justice, who holds the scales of justice, right? She wears a blindfold because our laws are to be applied equally and fairly amongst everybody. Nobody gets treated differently. That's the way it's supposed to be. But regardless of what you think about sanctuary cities, there's nothing fair about that. There's nothing equal. It's a blatant violation of law.
Yeah, and you always hear people talk about the rule of law. If you lose the rule of law, you don't have a society. You don't have a law-abiding society, because law is the only thing that keeps a society cohesive, and keeps people, keeps people obeying the law and doing things that they're supposed to do. No,
you are correct. I mean, look at the examples of some of these illegal people here that get released, and they're the ones who are out there committing the crimes. I mean, we see it. We see those examples on a daily basis. It's just we need to do something. We need to get better at that. But I don't know what.
I think the policies are going to backfire because the uptick in crime in the United States is affecting the Latin and the African American community more than it is any other communities, because that's where these illegals wind up. They wind up in that community. And they did a study recently, a survey actually, and they said that the people in the Hispanic community aren't so much for the open border policy. They've come here and they've living the American dream, started families, working hard, and now you have people coming in and stealing and robbing and doing all the things that they do. And I think it's going to backfire on the current administration, the current policies that are in effect, because on election day we'll see what happens, and then going into 2024, I think we'll also see then. Because, people who are here and they realize what America is really all about, they're not going to want this influx of criminals and fentanyl and all the different things that are coming over that border.
You're 100% correct. A lot of the Hispanic, they're tired. I mean, if you look at the border, and I grew up at the border, the southwest border by the Laredo area. My dad had a little farm, and I remember back in the day, you'd see one or two just wanting water, some food. Now my brother runs our family ranch, and he'll see 20 or 30 come in through our property, and he just calls Border Patrol. He takes off because how many of this have, what I'm saying? I don't know. it's out of control. We need to do something about it. You know?
We need to have a policy. Listen, I have no problem with people coming into the country that want to be law abiding and work hard, but we can't take millions. You know, we have to have a limit to it, and there has to be a system in place that we can, you know, document who's coming in, and you know, I mean, how much medical medical can we provide for people? You know, we have to provide for our own people. Now we have all these other millions. And then the bad thing is what we talked about earlier, the drugs coming over the border. The cartels are running the border. They're making millions and billions off of sending people over and then sending the narcotics over. So, you know, the policy is destroying our country. I think that that's clear, but I guess that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Phil, I just want you, Phil, I want you to go to a quick commercial and then we'll,
Joe Murray, attorney at law. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of the fence. His website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702. Or you could email Joe at jmurray-law.com. And Joe, you know, we weren't talking about you when we were talking about killing some attorneys. That was just joking around. But again, anybody listening, if you'd like to advertise on Police Off the Cuff, all you have to do is send us an email at policeoffthecuff1@gmail.com. Our rates are very reasonable. It might be the right thing for your business. We have an international audience and we have a very positive audience in the United States. So policeoffthecuff #1@gmail.com.
you know, Steve and Javier, I know you guys go all over the world, all over the country, talking. How about college campuses? The college students understand why that just open borders is not a good thing. And look, I'm saying it. There may be people in our chat that think it's a good thing. I'm saying it's not a good thing. The students on college campuses understand why it's not, or they think the border should be wide open?
Well, we were on the college and university circuit there for quite some time before COVID. And we were just there to tell the Escobar story. And we hit some of the major universities, you know, around the United States, a lot of the major universities. And during the Q&A, that part never came up. Yeah. So I guess the answer to your question is I honestly don't know personally what their thoughts are. I know that we never had any issues at the universities or colleges. And I mean, we spoke at Ohio State, University of Texas, Tennessee, Georgia,
Georgetown.
Yeah. We've been all over on the college circuit. And the kids were just fascinated by the Narcos series. I think they were somewhat unbelieving that, you know, two guys would really go do all that stuff. And I think they wanted to see how crazy we were or something. I guess they think we were idiots.
Yeah. But and just give them a plug. We love college kids because, man, they'll research just like y'all, everything out there, and they'll come up with some great questions. But they're fun because they're not afraid to ask, or But it's always fun talking to college kids because they will have researched you back and forth.
I guess the ones that have come will be the ones that are interested in it too. So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. Duty Ron, thank you for the $10 super chat. Brave men, I am honored to be here with these two, Steve and Javier. Thank you for your service.
No,
thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
You guys
get a lot of that. I mean, even though you guys are old, people like you.
Duty Ron's also a member of the NYPD that's retired, has a great podcast. So
nice.
He means it from the heart, what he said.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the girls, they're all coming in here because they all want to meet Javier. They've heard stories about Javier Pena.
Yeah, right. That Netflix. You know what? I just got to say it's fun because my number, Steve will say his number one question. My number one question when we open it up to the Q&A is, did I have all those affairs?
Yes, he did.
That's what they want to know. Did I have all those affairs? You know what? So
you guys want to find out? You read this book. You get this book. You find out.
And to be on the serious side, I was ordered by the United States government. So yes.
Good answer.
All right.
Good answer.
Hey,
he was having undercover affairs. He was doing it for the government.
I wish that would have been true, man. But anyway, Steve, tell them your number one question, man.
Yeah, my number one question is, did they really sacrifice our cat on our front door when we first moved to Colombia? And you know what? Just I'll answer the question for you. We did have a cat in Colombia. The cat's name was Puff. That part's true. And Puff did die in Colombia, but he was an old cat. He had a heart attack. And, you know, sicarios didn't break in our apartment and sacrifice him on our front door. There's some sick writers out in Hollywood.
Dramatic licensing, I guess. Right?
Oh, big time, big time.
When you guys look back on your DEA career, and specifically, you know, the taking down of Pablo Escobar and all the things you did in connection with it, can you actually believe that that was your life at one time?
You know what? There were times, and you know what? And just real quick, the way I, you know how the way I got to Colombia was a mistake. I put in because you're supposed to, you know, they just don't send you. You put in for the country, and I had 4 years in Austin, and I put in for Mexico because I wanted to go to Mexico. And my boss comes in and says, Javier, did you put in for Colombia? I said, no, sir. I said, well, you got selected for Colombia. And he says, we can fight it because you didn't put in for it. I said, you know what, boss? The paperwork's done. I'll go to Colombia. I had to go to the map to see where Colombia was. So that was how I get there. And then my boss, I get there, says, Javier, you got the Escobar investigation. I had heard, but I didn't know who Pablo Escobar was. So that was my introduction to the Medellin.
You know, sometimes things happen by accident, and that's what's supposed to happen, you know?
With me, it was way by accident. I think you did too, right, Steve? You had
yeah, I actually got selected to go to Barranquilla. And then and so, you know, I mean, you know how it is in our law enforcement culture. For us, when you got transferred, it was on you to throw your party.
That's right. That's what the way it used to be on the PD too. They grabbed like 5 sergeants. All right, each guy put in $500. You're paying to get everyone else drunk, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so we threw the party and everything, and then they rescinded my transfer because they needed somebody that spoke Spanish immediately. And then, you know, so later I put in for Bogota and got that. That's how I was at Bogota. I really didn't.
Now, Steve, you speak fluent Spanish?
You hear my accent. Even if I did, can you imagine what it would sound like? Oh, you know?
I ain't buying that.
You know,
hey, I had a guy in the homicide squad that was big, white Irish guy, Scottish guy, and he spoke fluent Spanish, and perps would speak right in front of him. They're like, there's no way this guy speaks Spanish. And then he would, you know, write out a statement of everything they said in front of him, you know.
You know, they sent me to language school for 6 months, and I did learn to speak Spanish, but they taught me to speak proper Spanish. I don't speak proper English, you know. So I got to Colombia, I could talk to the cops, and you know, I used all the vocabulary I knew, and then they would talk back to me in colloquial and dialects, you know, that I wasn't familiar with. But here's another cool thing about the cops down there. When we were chasing Escobar, if we had a day when, you know, things weren't so busy, a couple of the cops would grab me and they're like, hey, Murph, let's go get a stick. A stick, let's go get a cup of coffee. And we would just sit there and we'd practice Spanish. They would teach me different things. And you know, a lot of the operations that Javier and I went on, you could be on these Huey gunships flying in to raid these places, and you're the only English speaker, you know, and the commander's looking at you, and he's in Spanish, he's saying, stick, me and you, we're going to take the front door. So you had to be able to converse a little bit.
Right, to understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Willez Pony, thank you for the $9.99 super chat again. Did you have all these affairs undercover? Wow. Who wouldn't want to even get their hand kissed by these warriors? Whoa. This show is going from a PG rating to an R rating. I don't know.
We got a fan club going, Bill.
Like I wish all that.
Javier fan club.
That's right.
You need to post your phone number up here, Javier.
That's right. 1-800, you know.
Yeah. Hey,
for a good time call.
Hey guys, I got a question about Pablo Escobar here. I'm going to use an analogy from organized crime in New York. Now, when Joe Colombo started the Italian American Civil Rights League, he was bringing a lot of attention to the mafia, and he basically was killed. And there's always rumor and innuendo that the Godfather at the time looked the other way, like, let it happen. Did any of Pablo Escobar's rival drug dealers try to take him out at any time during the investigation?
Oh, that was one of the biggest wars. Yes. And you know what? And it hits New York because it was the Cali cartel who hated Pablo because Pablo was trying to take control over New York. And if you know, and I know you know some of the NYPD guys working back then, Cali cartel pretty much controlled the New York markets. Pablo was trying, and Cali cartel wanted to kill Pablo Escobar. And the war goes back. I think they had like a 15-year war, and it goes back to basically turf. But Cali cartel put a bomb at Pablo Escobar's building called the Monaco building in Medellin, you know, trying to kill the family. And the only one that was hurt was Pablo Escobar's little daughter, I think 5-6-year-old at the time. So can you imagine the hatred Pablo had towards a Cali cartel? He retaliated, and at a soccer game in Cali, Pablo had a whole bunch of them killed. Cali hired British mercenaries. I mean, can you believe that? They planned the raid. They had choppers that had people out there that were going to go kill Pablo at his ranch. They had to abort. One of the choppers crashed. It never took place, but there were British mercenaries that were paid by the Cali cartel. So yes, Cali cartel was always trying to kill Pablo, and it's the Cali cartel who hooked up with Los Pepes. Cali cartel financed Los Pepes to try to do all the atrocities, all the bombs in Medellin, and later on we found out who was leading it. And you know what? We had one of our officers, and you know, out of respect, I'm not going to mention his name. The guy later on got killed, but one of our officers, mid-ranking, was helping out Los Pepes, was helping out the Cali cartel. So it was, you know, and we find out after Escobar gets killed. Matter of fact, the head of Los Pepes, guy Don Pena, he's in the United States right now. He got extradited. He's in prison, and that's where we get accused. I get accused especially because Don Berna was always at our police base helping out the cops. So we know him. Steve and I know him, and later on we found out that he was the head of Los Pepes. So that's where I get, because I get a lot of accusations in real life. I get an accusation that I was a member of Los Pepes that was out there killing and all that. So that was my second time in Colombia, and we were going up against the Cali cartel. And you know what? It got so bad that I had to leave Colombia because I was just getting inundated by the press with accusations. You know, it's, you know, some of y'all know about the stress, right? But physically, I just said, hey, you know what? I can't take this.
The more active you are in law enforcement, the more you get the allegations.
Yeah, and I was getting allegations. It was all bullshit. It was never, you know. So that's why I did 2 years, my second time in Colombia. It was not true. And but yeah, anyway, but going back to traffickers, Cali hated Pablo. And after Pablo gets killed, basically the son of Juan Pablo, the son of Pablo, I'm sorry, his name is Juan Pablo, he's changed his name. He goes to the Cali cartel, says, hey, truce, guys, my family, we want to leave here in peace. Please, no more wars. Cali cartel says, kid, you got 24 hours for you and your family to leave Colombia. If not, we're going to kill everybody. So they left. They changed their names. They left the country.
Hey, I got to say something, Bill. That photo you just showed, you were talking about us wearing Rolex watches. Look at that $10 Casio watch I'm wearing.
and it's got blood on it too, but it's probably worth the fortune with that blood on it, you know? Some people in the chat will take a bidding war, you know, they'll want to buy it, you know? So guys, I mean, this is fascinating. It's a fascinating story, and I'm sure we didn't even scratch the surface.
No,
well, I told you guys when you first came on, before we came on, that we were just going to have a conversation, and I think that's what we did, you know? Yeah. And I think it's more interesting for our listeners to just hear us talking like cops do in a bar. I'm sorry I don't have any Coronas that I could give you, but, you know, because the stories get better when you drink Corona, I think. You know?
And I just want to reiterate, Steve said it, but the real heroes, Colombia National Police, and one of the real heroes is Colonel Hugo Martinez, who led the search block, who later on got promoted to a general. And his boss, it never got the recognition, and his name is General Octavio Vargas Silva. He was the architect. He was like the chief of police, but he was just very smart, and he's the one who organized the search for Pablo Escobar. There's two gentlemen, and Colonel Martinez's son, Lieutenant Hugo Martinez. If people don't know, it's father-son team from the police, a colonel and a lieutenant. The lieutenant is the one who DFs Pablo Escobar speaking, and that's how they ended up locating him and getting him killed. They are the heroes. And you know what? And we, at every, with every audience, we ended by saying, visit Colombia. It's a beautiful country. It's a great country, great people. The police now is a model. I mean, you know, just visit. Tourism is safe. I've had a lot of friends that are visiting Medellin. You know, and the only caveat, you know, Bill and Phil, I tell people, if you do go to Medellin, you do not bad mouth Pablo Escobar in Medellin.
Right, you keep your mouth shut.
But
they got some of those old, your old retread women left there.
I wish.
Their daughters and their granddaughters.
Yeah, you may. Some people may come from our show and say, "Hey, you know Javier Pena? Oh yeah, papi, yeah, yo."
You know Spanish. You know Spanish.
Hey,
mira, papi.
I just want to say to you guys, you know, NYPD, you have the respect of law enforcement around the world. You guys encounter everything, you know, situations that nobody else has in the United States. And what I love about going to New York is when you meet a New York cop and they find out who you are, you're a brother. You know, it's still old school. I've been up there in New York for meetings when we were writing the book and doing some TV stuff. And we were walking by one day and it just happened to be right there where Trump Tower was. And there was like 10 cops and Trump was in the tower. So there was cops everywhere. And these two old producers are with me and they said, "Hey, you see those NYPD guys? I bet you're afraid to go talk to them." And I said, "Come on, I'll introduce you. I mean, I know you guys." And so before we got up there, like, "Hey guys, you know who this is? This is that guy, Steve Murphy from DEA, and he was in Narcos." And the next thing you know, I got arms around me like we've been brothers, you know, for years. And
you know, that is a great thing about law enforcement. There is that brotherhood. Like, no matter where you go in the world, you're a cop. Another cop will give you the time of day. We'll take a picture with you. We'll have that camaraderie, you know? Like, if I just tell them who I am anywhere in the world, they say, "Oh, you're the Supreme Commander."
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm telling you, man, people do treat us good. The cops treat us good around the country, but nobody treats us like NYPD. You guys are top notch.
My hats
off to you.
Thank you very much. That's a nice.
I gotta mention, during the Escobar search, I mean, your guys had more knowledge, always giving us intelligence. I mean, it was great. It was great.
Yeah. That's what I say.
You know, that's so true. Like, when you go anywhere and, like, as detectives, when we would go look for someone, we'd go into another town, another city, another state, and you just go meet with their detectives and they're throwing their vests on and they'll do whatever you want them to do. Mm-hmm. And that's an amazing thing, you know, where you could get to some place and be like, "Oh, what are you bothering us tonight? There's a ball game on," you know?
Yeah, there's a ball game. I can't come out.
Yeah. But, you know, once, you know, when you go and you're the NYPD, or I'm sure when other police departments come to us, it's the same thing. "What do you got? What do you need?" And we'll go out with them and we'll go, you know, look, if they're looking for Bad Bart and he's got 40 guns, we're going with them, you know, and we'll meet that threat with as much force as it needs to be met with, you know.
Yeah.
We had a policy when we would go out of state, like a lot of times we would go into Jersey, they'd buy us dinner. And if they came over, we would buy them dinner. That would be the thing, that they wouldn't let us pay. They'd take us out for dinner and a beer. And same thing when they came by us, we would do the same thing for them. And it's just mutual respect. And there's nothing like that brotherhood, that camaraderie between.
Oh, Phil, are you trying to find out where Steve and Javier are going to be so they'll buy us dinner?
No, I'm going to make the offer that if they're in New York and they get a hold of us and we can all meet up, I'm buying them the first beer. How's that?
All right, good.
Hey, I know. I was reading the book and Javier likes his beer, man. So you may.
I've had plenty of beer. That's why.
That's right.
All right, I'll buy the first 5.
You got to understand Javier's position. I don't drink alcohol anymore, so he's got to drink for 2.
I drink for Steve. So.
But hey, if you're coming to Orlando, let me know.
Yep. And I'm in San Antonio. Please let me know too.
That's great. So, guys, Steve, final words.
I just wanted to get that out about my thoughts about NYPD, because I've done things up there on the job with some of your cohorts that, I just mentioned this one. We were up there for meetings. And the evening was rolling around, and the guys came. It was New York Drug Enforcement Task Force. I see your sign behind you there, Phil. And they said, "What do you guys want to do tonight?" And so I had some young guys with me. They said, "We'd like to see Ground Zero." This is when they were still digging it out.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, we got several unmarked cruisers sitting out there. We're going up the road along the river there. Traffic backs up. Next thing you know, they're hitting their horns, but their sirens are hooked to their horns. And so, they're whoop whooping everybody as we're going. And the next thing you know, we're up on the sidewalks. And then the guys at the site at Ground Zero see us coming, and they're moving people out of the way. Just old school, the way you treat other police officers.
Yeah, you're right, man. That's I think we're starting to lose some of that, but you're right. That old school police work and the mutual respect, and what do you want? We'll do it for you.
Yeah. But just to repeat, also, true honor to be with you two guys on here. You want to see some heroes? Your listeners are looking at them. I mean, you guys have a fantastic following. I looked you up on YouTube. You got a fantastic following. They're a great show. This has been so much fun than just sitting and going by script trying to answer questions. So God bless you guys. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Steve. We appreciate it. Javier, we got to give you some last because everyone's going to be calling you for the numbers of your Chiquitas.
I mean, wow. And what y'all have seen in your career, I mean, no one has seen it in New York. I mean, y'all have been there. You've done it. You know how it is. Some people start bragging, guys. You've been there 100 times front and back. So thank you. And like Steve, I just want to echo, I mean, you guys are fantastic. They've always treated us like golden. I know our DEA guys working with NYPD, they love NYPD. There's a joint brotherhood. And also, again, I want to tell the listeners, visit Colombia. It's a beautiful country. We're being very sincere. It's very safe. It's, like I said, beautiful. And again, the true heroes in Colombia were the cops. Colombia National Police, nobody else, not CIA, not military. It was them.
That's great, Javier. Phil, final words.
This was such a great show. It was such an honor and a pleasure to meet you guys. And this thing right here, I don't know if you guys could see it. My daughter gave me that Christmas time. It says, "Real heroes don't wear capes." It's the truth. We're amongst heroes here. And you guys, the one thing that I took away from this was that you didn't try to say, "Well, I did it. You said we throughout the whole thing. You talked about the heroes in Colombia, the analysts, all the people that helped together. Anytime I talk about a homicide investigation that I worked on, I always say it was a team effort. You guys are exemplary. You're showing that that's what it is. It's a team effort. You're not trying to say that you guys are, the greatest thing since sliced bread, so to speak. But But thank you very much for coming on. It was a pleasure, and hopefully we'll meet up one day, maybe in New York or in Orlando or in Texas.
Yep.
Guys, thank you so much, folks. All you folks listening, thank you so much for your support. And I mean, these are two of the greatest guests we've had probably in the history of the show. But thank you so much for coming on. And I always like it when we get guests that almost like celebrity guests, because I want to show some of these celebrity hosts we can do it too. We know what questions to ask, right? God bless, guys. Folks, have a great night.
Stay safe, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
One episode just ain't enough.